The highest savings rate in the last 40 years. The US hit that during the pandemic. But now it's dwindling and fast. It's nearly back to 2019 levels before the COVID-related stimulus and direct federal payment. On one hand, that sounds like bad news, and it is. But there's an unseen silver lining that most people aren't talking about. We shouldn't be surprised about the dropping personal savings rate. There are too many things pulling at it. For one, the families that saw the biggest increase in personal savings were also the ones in the lowest income tiers, the ones most vulnerable to unforeseen costs, the ones with the smallest reserve funds. Check out this chart that shows how much the bank accounts of different income tiers changed during the course of the pandemic. Households with the lowest median income saw the greatest rise in percentage in their checking accounts. And it's a good thing. It's good that they had that extra cushion. But what are the consequences now that the cushion is disappearing? First, those folks, our neighbors, our friends, they are now in the gray area between comfort and survival, between thriving and living. None of us would want that for ourselves, for our friends, or our loved ones. And second, and this is important for investors, those households won't have as much disposable income to put into our economy. Let's unpack that one. What kinds of things were they buying with their disposable income? Well, everything that there is a shortage of right now. Remember, this shortage is one of fixed supply or constrained supply paired with overwhelming demand. The overwhelming demand is partly a result of the transfer of money from the federal government to the American people, namely stimulus payments and child tax payments. Economists note that this increase in personal savings isn't flat across the board. In terms of raw dollars, it isn't even, and that the wealthiest households unsurprisingly save the most. Because this chart measures the percentage of savings, wealthy households don't show as much growth because they didn't double their savings, didn't increase by 100%. However, low-income households did. But you can see here that the wealthiest households had gained 3 times as many dollars in their savings account since 2019 compared to the bottom income households. And another thing that you might miss about the chart is that it represents checking account balances, not savings accounts, not brokerage accounts, not Roth IRAs, checking. Daily expenses, temporary liquidity between a paycheck and a bill. A checking account isn't really an emergency fund, but more of a cash cushion for some small unforeseen expenses. The Fed has stated that a whopping 56% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. And with inflation slashing the spending power each month for all Americans of all income classes, never in my lifetime have these saving rates been more important and carried more real-world consequences. The Fed even said that these record high savings rates aren't excessive given the extraordinary financial demands families face. Economist Michael Strain had 2 interesting insights that we should all consider. The first is that the lowest income households are the ones most hurt by inflation. So while we shouldn't be and aren't rooting for them to have less savings, the fact is it's in some ways in their best interest to deploy that cash before it loses its buying power. And second, the supply chain could use a cooling off. It could benefit from reduced demand. Part of our inflation issue is the oversupply of money, the oversupply of liquidity paired with the supply chain shock and COVID complications. But remember, if you're watching this, most likely you aren't the ones looking at those inflation numbers and aggregate savings account amounts while also struggling to put food on the table. We probably aren't struggling to keep our kids warm or worrying about how we're going to pay next month's rent. Let's stay humble and find a silver lining. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.